Kia ora, good morning everyone, Rich Wong here, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to have a look at this new Viltrox 56mm f1.7 APS-C lens. The sample Viltrox sent me is for the Fuji X mount, but this lens will also be available for the Sony E and the Nikon Z as well. As usual, this is a completely independent review. The biggest selling point of this lens is definitely the price. It is only US $139, which makes it one of the cheapest fast autofocus prime lens in the market. With the 85mm equivalent focal length and the fast f1.7 maximum aperture, it could be a great choice for anyone who wants a portrait lens without having to spend a lot of money. In this review, I'm also going to do a bit of comparison with the Viltrox 56mm f1.4 lens. The f1.4 lens maximum aperture is half stop faster, but the price is 2.5 times more expensive than this new 56mm f1.7 lens. So let's see if this new Viltrox 56mm f1.7 is a great budget portrait lens, or could Viltrox has cut too many corners to achieve this insanely low price. This new 56mm f1.7 lens is a very compact lens. Putting it next to Viltrox 56mm f1.4, which is not a big lens at all, you can see this new lens is much smaller. This f1.7 lens is also pretty light at around 171 grams. Part of the reason why this new lens is so light is that it has a very plasticky construction. The body is pretty much all made of plastic, including the lens hood. So the lens does feel a little bit cheaper and not as solid as Viltrox f1.4 metal body lens. When you install the plastic lens hood on the lens, it doesn't give you that satisfying and secure click the f1.4 lens has. If you're not careful, you may even rotate the lens hood a bit without noticing it. All the recent plastic Viltrox lenses I've tested have this similar design. I really wish there is a stronger click for the lens hood. The lens hood is also pretty shallow. I expect a much deeper lens hood for a 85mm equivalent focal length lens. The metal lens hood for the f1.4 is much deeper. Now, while most of the lens body is made of plastic, it still has a metal lens mount and there is a USB-C port on the lens mount for firmware update. Now, I have mentioned many times before in my other Viltrox reviews, but I want to mention it again. Viltrox is definitely one of the best companies when it comes to providing firmware updates to address any bugs or compatibility issues. The lens has no switches, no aperture ring, and also there is not any rubber seal on the lens mount. But for a lens that is only $139, I really wasn't expecting to see any of these features. This lens uses STM stepping motor for autofocus. When taking photos, autofocus speed is pretty decent and the autofocus is also quiet and smooth. Autofocus performance of this lens just doesn't feel like a budget lens at all. Eye detection works great with my Fuji X-H2 and I have no problem with the autofocus at all even when shooting under low light condition. If I move the autofocus point to the extreme corner, autofocus accuracy is still alright and very usable. But the f1.4 lens seems to be a little bit more consistent and reliable when I put the AF point at the extreme corner. Let's look at the image quality now. All the test photos in this review were shot in RAW format and I convert them to JPEG file using Adobe Lightroom. In this review, I have also disabled all the profile correction. The reason is that when I was going through the RAW files using the Adobe Lightroom, I noticed the lens profile correction seems to be quite unreliable. What I mean is, when I was browsing through the photos in Adobe Lightroom, I noticed the default lens profile correction seems to change between different photos. I'm not too sure if it's caused by the pre-production firmware on the lens or the version of the Adobe Lightroom that I have on my computer, but to keep it consistent, I've disabled the profile correction for all the photos in this review. Okay, now let's have a look at the center sharpness first. Here are the 200% center crops. We have the Viltrox 56mm f1.7 on the right side, and I'm also showing you the photos I shot with the Viltrox 56mm f1.4 on the left for comparisons. The Viltrox 56 f1.7 lens is a bit soft at f1.7. It gets a bit better at f2.8 and becomes very sharp from f4 onwards. With this set of test photos, I can see diffraction starting to make the photo softer from f11 onwards. And we look at the corner sharpness now. The f1.7 lens is a bit soft at f1.7. It's softer than the f1.4 lens at f1.8, but at least I can still roughly read the small letters on the test chart. You may notice the photo from the f1.7 lens is quite a bit darker, and that's because of vignetting, but I will talk about vignetting a little bit later on. Stopping down the lens would gradually improve the corner sharpness. The f1.7 lens becomes very sharp at f5.6. All these corner sharpness test photos were captured by focusing at the center of the photo. If I refocus at the corner, it improved the corner sharpness significantly. If I refocus at the corner, stopping down to f2.8, and I can already get really sharp corner. It suggests this lens has a bit of field curvature, and if your main subject is located at the corner and you don't care too much about the center sharpness, then you definitely should focus at the corner. We'll talk about the close-up shooting performance now. The minimum focus distance of this Viltrox lens is 55 cm, so it's quite similar but slightly closer than the f1.4 lens. The maximum magnification ratio is 0.11 time. When shooting at the minimum focus distance, at f1.7, the image is slightly soft, but it will become much better once you stop down to f2.8. For a lot of people, bokeh is really important, or even the most important thing when you're buying a portrait lens like this Viltrox 56mm f1.7. The bokeh from this f1.7 lens is nice and smooth when you are shooting at f1.7. I don't really notice any harsh highlight at the edge of the bokeh balls. When you stop down the lens, bokeh remains very round even when you stop down to f5.6. Comparing this lens with the f1.4 lens, the biggest difference is that the f1.4 lens, well, it has half a stop faster maximum aperture, so you can blur the background quite a bit more. And when shooting at around f1.7, f1.8, the bokeh from the f1.4 lens is very round even at the corner, while the f1.7 lens has a bit of cat's eye effect. But other than that, there isn't too much difference between these two lenses. We'll look at vignetting performance now. At f1.7, without any vignetting correction, the Viltrox 56mm f1.7 lens has some pretty noticeable amount of vignetting. It becomes a lot better at f2.8. You have to stop down the lens to f5.6 for vignetting to be not noticeable. The f1.4 lens is a lot better in this area. In terms of chromatic aberration, this 1.7 lens is surprisingly good. Even when shooting at wide open, I see very minimal amount of chromatic aberration. I'm a bit surprised by that because usually the fast budget lens would suffer quite a bit in this area, but not this case with this new Viltrox lens. Local performance is also very good. There is a lot less color fringing compared to the f1.4 lens. Okay, it's time to look at my brick wall test photos again. Without any distortion correction applied, the f1.7 lens has a small amount of pincushion distortion. But the amount of distortion is so little, so just applying a -1 distortion correction in Adobe Lightroom would pretty much remove any visible distortion. By the way, even though both these lenses are 56mm focal length, the f1.7 lens has a slightly wider field of view than the f1.4 lens, but the difference is really small, so you won't really notice that unless you are shooting some side-by-side photo like this. Viltrox lenses usually have excellent lens flare control for the price point. I rarely complain about Viltrox lenses' lens flare performance. This time with this 56mm f1.7 lens flare control is also quite acceptable. It's not as good as some of the best Viltrox lenses. I do see a bit of lens flare and ghosting when there is a strong light source in front of the camera. But for a budget lens, the lens flare control is definitely better than acceptable. If you like Sunstars, unfortunately, this lens is not really that great. We have to stop down the lens a lot, almost to f16 to see the Sunstars. And even at f16s, the Sunstars are just not that beautiful. At wide open, the Viltrox 56mm f1.7 lens has quite a bit of coma at the corner. You can see it quite easily in this photo. Stopping down the lens a bit to f2 and you can get some good improvements. It becomes a lot better once you stop down the lens to f2.8. In terms of focus briefing, there is a moderate amount of focus briefing when I did my 1m to 10m focus briefing test. The f1.4 lens has quite a bit more focus briefing than this f1.7 lens. However, I noticed the f1.7 lens focus transition seems to be not quite as smooth. There is a bit of hesitation when I do tap to focus and switch between foreground and background. When I work on reviews, I always keep in mind what is the price and the target users of the product that I'm reviewing. If I'm reviewing an expensive product, then my expectations would be a lot higher. And if I'm reviewing a product that is designed for beginner users, I would then imagine that I am a beginner user and see whether this is a great product for such kind of users or not. So for a US $139 autofocus lens with f1.7 maximum aperture, to be honest, my expectation was set pretty low. Pretty much if it works, then I will be pretty happy. But with this Viltrox lens, it completely exceeds my expectation in pretty much every single area. Not only everything works very well, autofocus is fast and quiet, the image quality is also very decent. Even when I compare it with the $329 Viltrox 56mm f1.4 lens, apart from the more plasticky construction and the maximum aperture is half a stop slower, the performance of this f1.7 lens is very similar to the f1.4 lens. And this f1.7 lens is also much more compact and lighter as well. To be honest, I'm not really sure how Viltrox managed to sell this lens for only $139. This is easily one of the best value for money lens I've tested recently.